is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Greg Franke is a TV reporter at a 24-hour sports channel in Toledo. His passion is international hockey, and one of its greatest moments came in 1972 during the deciding game of the series between Canada and Russia. Greg thought it was time to get Americans to appreciate this moment in hockey history, so he wrote Epic Confrontation, Canada versus Russia on Ice, the greatest sports drama of all time. But it took some time, didn't it, Greg?
This project's been going on for a long time. I did all these interviews. I went overseas and talked to these people and in Russia and Canadians and basically put the whole thing together. Reality is I had a Canadian publisher lined up to publish the story at about the 30th anniversary of this event. And then the NHL went on strike. So the whole season got canceled. It was a couple of years after the 30th anniversary. Right. And so the publisher I had got cold feet. To be honest with you, I just sort of put it aside, and I didn't even think about it anymore. And quite honestly, I heard an advertisement about Page Publishing probably about a year ago or a year and a half ago. And I thought, well, I've got a manuscript that I've already finished. I might as well submit it. And here we go. I mean, if it wasn't for Page Publishing, this manuscript may never have seen the light of day. I want to turn the young generation of Canadians onto the story that maybe never really heard about it, and I want to turn people in America, in the U.S., onto the story because it's just an unbelievable story involving a lot of people that they are, a lot of sports heroes in the United States, and they just don't know about it because it was Canada, not the U.S.
Right.
I mean, the whole country just shut down when they played the deciding game of this big series in 1972. The kids stayed away from school. They stayed home to watch the game. Businesses shut down. Over 90% of the public was watching the game. There were tens of thousands of telegrams that were sent to the players. But when they lost early in the series, and then they came back to win in a miraculous fashion. And when they lost, it was like the people just didn't know what to do. They just were totally stunned. They had believed all these decades that they were by far the best in hockey, and this was the one thing that they could lay claim to be the world's best. And then, of course, this was the height of the Cold War, and the Soviet Union was considered our mortal enemy, and they just kind of took the Canadians' game away from them right under their noses, and the people were it was like mass depression across the whole country. So that's the way it was in Canada. In the United States, I don't think the story is really all that well known, but we have the 1980 Miracle on Ice in the 1980 Olympics where the U.S. beat the Russians, and that gives some kind of a sense to people in the United States the magnitude of this story.
I have to ask you, did you pay your own expenses to go to Russia to interview all of these people? And
my wife is Russian. So the way this all happened was her teacher, when she was in school in Russia, the classes stay together for from K through 12. So my wife had the daughter of the famous coach that started Russian hockey as her teacher for 12 years. And so they were good friends. And that daughter of the coach introduced me to my wife. So I just went over to Russia with her because she was going over to see her parents and her family. And so I went over there. And so I was there anyway. And then I just sort of, because of the connections that had developed through that, I was able to track down all these hockey players.
What a great story, Greg, from start to finish. Yeah. Somebody should do a movie about you doing this book.
The origin of this book is almost as fascinating as the book itself, I think.
Yeah.
Because this book takes it through basically 1972. Starts when Canada was just dominant in the world. And then the Soviets came in about the mid-50s, and it goes up through 72, and then there's a chapter at the end kind of outlining what happened afterward. But what happened after 1972 is a whole book in itself. And so my next project is probably going to be to write a sequel that will focus on those years of 72 to 91.
All right, well, I'll be looking forward to that. Listen, Greg Franke is on a national tour, so look for him. Thomas Fribb spent 25 years with the Phoenix Police Department and wants to leave a legacy for his kids. So he decided to write about the dark places, emergency calls, pranks, and life and death drama that played out right before his eyes every day. The name of his book, The Beat Goes On. And aren't you lucky to be able to say you would have done your job for free if you didn't have bills to pay? I mean, not many people can say that.
Probably not. you didn't want to miss a night. You really didn't. And if you did take a night off, you'd come in the next night and there'd been a crazy riot or something and you had missed it. That's wrong. I should have been there.
Oh, jeez.
And I worked first 10 years of it on shift 3, and it's an area of Phoenix called the East San Buren area where everything goes. The prostitutes, drugs, 24 hours a day. There's something going on constantly down there. And of course, the Johns flock to it because they know that the girls are out on the street and, you know.
This is like an autobiography of your days as a cop.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is there a particular story that stands out?
Yeah, there was an incident where we got called to there's little motels that are all run down from the 40s and that are still operating. And the gal that owned the place, she was just all frumpy looking in a house coat, and she was all complaining that her cat was missing and some kids had rented a room and they trashed it and they ran out without paying, and the front drawer of a dresser was laying on the floor. And I heard kind of like a hiss sound, and I didn't know what it was. And the curtains over by the window started to move a little bit. Pulled them back, and there was a 15-foot boa constrictor on the floor, all curled up happily. And, what do you do with a boa constrictor, We found out that animal control would take it if we brought it down to them. So we figured out that we could get one of our paddy wagons with a barrel in it and a meat sack, and we'd put the steak in the sack and it'd be happy. So we picked the steak up. There's 4 of us, and we were all weightlifter guys back then, and this thing is really resisting. It's trying to curl, and we're doing all we can do to hold it out. And as we got it stretched out, it was probably about 8 or 9 inches around. I mean, it was a big snake. And about halfway down the snake, it was about 14 inches around for a few inches, and then went back to the 9. And I guess we can call it the search for the cat. So that's why.
Oh, God, that's terrible.
It turned out the kids had broken into a reptile zoo over on the other side of the city, and they stole a bunch of snakes and the boa. So they got them. The reptile farm got all the snakes back. But yeah, that was the question. It was in my mind. Where did this come from? Who carries this around in their back pocket, right?
Jeez.
But anyway, we carried it out to the street, waiting for the paddy wagon to come. So we would let it kind of start to curl, and then we'd try and straighten it back out. Boy, this thing was giving us a workout, I'm telling you. The cars driving by, our cops are standing on the sidewalk, so of course they look, and they're running into the curb and slamming, almost running into each other because they look over and see us with this big snake. So that was kind of a crazy incident.
So if there's one thing that you want to leave people with after they read this book, what would it be?
Probably the consideration that your police officers are human and normal, and they're just out there trying to keep a lid on things, but they have humor in them. A lot of it is just things that came up, and I tried to end up each of them with a little humor in them, even if it was gallows humor, I did a book signing here a couple weeks ago. That was a retired officer's picnic, and they asked me to come down and bring the book, and we did quite well down there. And then I have a book signing at Barnes & Noble at Metro Center in Phoenix. I sent out a lot of introduction letters to police agencies and other bookstores and that around the state. And I had a inquiry from my high school graduation class, which was 1960.
Nice.
And so I had a book on most of the graduates from the last reunion, and I sent letters out to those people, and a lot of those bought the book.
All right, Thomas, good work. ABC, or Adrian Bernard Colin Delavante, started writing short stories and poetry in high school. He graduated art school and then took a part-time job as a doorman that turned into a full-time job. And the next thing he knew, he met so many interesting characters, he had to share them in a book. It's entitled Highrise Observations and Secrets of a Doorman.
And stationed at a front desk You would not imagine all the things that one can hear and see, and people will come and they will tell all of their lives. And then there are people who will say crazy, crazy things like more information than one would want to know. You're going to find someone who pretends to like people, and deep down they are racist, anti-Semitic, a hater of all others who do not look like them or share their opinions. People who are desperate to be wanted, to be accepted, to be needed in society, and deep down they are lonely and cannot socialize, cannot fit in, they feel left out. Most of it is part of their own doing, and they do not realize it. You will find people who are dreamers, who have illusions of grandeur, people that are living in their own make believe world. And you will find people who are fearful of everything, especially the advancing technology, the internet, the lack of privacy. People are fearful of that. People who are longing to be listened to. They cannot find a good listener.
The doorman becomes the shrink.
Yes, absolutely. There's a character called Heinrich who stood out to me more so than most others because he does not acknowledge or deny that he is fond of the Nazi party. And he will come to the lobby, for example, and he will express things that are definitely in line with the Nazi party. And he will do marches around the lobby and he will click his heels.
All right, so we have just a cast of characters here. What's the takeaway?
I'm trying to communicate that in this life we encounter various characters, and some will be surprises, some will be expected, but a lot of it would be revealing. Some we will learn from, some we will be disappointed with, some will make us angry, and we just have to be prepared. It's like a learning experience, and no matter how much we think we know about people and their mindsets and their thinking and their beliefs, we will never, never know it all. But it's just a way to look at these characters and ourselves to try to understand each other as much as we can and to live together in peace with one another.
Oh, that's so sweet. Are you doing book signings in the lobby of your building?
No, I haven't done any book signing, but a lot of in the building have bought the book and they have given me feedbacks. And then, like, one person told me, "Oh, this book makes me think." One lady, she said, "I put it down and I cried. And at some points, I put it down and I laughed my head off." And I said, "Yes, that's what I wanted to achieve."
Yeah, right. Doormen and hairdressers, best shrinks on earth. Carmela Florio teaches special ed at a Long Island elementary school, and her daughter has special needs. So it was natural for her to write James and Awesome Autism to give all kids and parents some food for thought.
So James and Awesome Autism is about a little boy who goes to the park with his mom, and there's another family that goes to the park, and the child is typical, and she tries to play with the little boy, and the little boy doesn't want to play with her because he doesn't understand how to play, and she kind of, takes offense to it, and then she kind of learns through the story that, he's not being mean to her, it's just that he doesn't really know how to play. And then it also shows the struggles that the parent faces by having a child that has special needs and having a meltdown in front of everyone and all the stares that they receive. And at the end of the story, it kind of just explains how, we could all be together and play together, but, some people are different.
Was there a particular incident or did something particular happen that made you say, I got to write this book?
You know what? My daughter doesn't have autism. My daughter actually has ADHD and a speech delay. And I kind of felt like for the longest time, because I have a 9-year-old son, he's typical. And when his friends would come over to play or we would go somewhere, like, people always had so many questions about my daughter. Well, why isn't she speaking? Why isn't she this? Why isn't she that? And when a child has a speech delay, they're socially delayed also. So she kind of would want to play on her own. And I felt that, you know, the need to write a book to kind of explain the different disabilities would be helpful for students who are considered quote unquote typical because they don't understand. And that was one reason. And another reason is being a special needs teacher. I feel like sometimes, you know, the typical children don't understand them either. So I felt like there had to be some kind of book written in a way that a child would understand using characters that are around their age to understand that, hey, it's okay to be different. This is how they're different, but at the end of the day, we can all play together and be together.
Now, do the parents or the kids that you deal with know that you wrote this book?
I have a promoter, and she promotes my books, and I have an Instagram page. It's called @SpecialNeedsBook on Instagram, and I also put it on my private and personal Facebook and Instagram page. And I also did an event during Fashion Week for children where I actually went to Planet Hollywood, and some of the Real Housewives of New Jersey were there, and I read the books to the children that participated in the fashion show. And then I was also interviewed by OK Magazine, and that article was posted up on OK Magazine with where to get the book. And I'm also doing all different types of events, you know, all over the place that my manager is getting me, where I'm, you know, selling the books and reading the books. So I'm really trying to get my message out there the best way that I can to the kids that were there.
Most people try to do it on their own. What made you, or how did you find a manager?
Okay, so my manager's name is Jeannie Detour, and the way I found her was through a mutual friend. So one of the things that she's promoting are my books.
So she promotes your books, but she does it in a unique way. It's not just through book signings, but you're actually going to events. And how did the Real Housewives react to you?
They really, really liked the book a lot. You know, I gave them signed copies of my books, and they really enjoyed them. And, you know, they wanted to read them to their children when they got home.
So you really think you're onto something here?
I believe I am. I believe that there aren't any books out there like the ones that I wrote. And I feel like I want to continue. I want to, you know, do more. So I've done one on autism, one on a speech delay. I want to do one on blind, dyslexia, ADHD. There's so many different disabilities out there that people aren't exposed to. And I really feel that, you know, children need to be exposed to it. And even parents need to be exposed to it. A lot of people, you know, can be very ignorant and think if a child is carrying on, they're being quote unquote fresh, you know, but they're not. Maybe there's, you know, something wrong. Maybe they have sensory issues and they can't take the loud noises. So I want to hit every disability out there.
Great work, Carmela. You know, you're doing a public service. Thank you. I look forward to talking to you again. We have to take a quick break. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Daniel Lines collects fossils and creates school programs for kids. At one time, he had 2 rock shops in Minnesota, and then Crohn's disease completely changed his life, inspiring him to write Crohn's and a Life with the Other Big C.
So at the beginning, it just basically opens. I'm thinking I'm having an appendix attack. I go to the hospital, and at that time, it was kind of difficult to diagnose Crohn's. Not a lot of people knew a lot about it. So at first, I thought it was cancer, and then this, and they finally nailed it down to atypical Crohn's. And they wanted to do surgeries, but they kind of scared me about that, so I didn't let them do surgeries. That just made things kind of worse in a different way because of the medicines that they gave me. Destroyed my bones. I have osteopenia, which is a type of osteoporosis only older ladies get after menopause, but I had it in my 40s. Lost both of my hips, my shoulder. I just recently had to have a plate put in my neck to support the vertebrae, which are collapsing because of my bone disease.
And that was as a result of the drugs you were given.
Exactly, mostly the prednisone. I was actually diagnosed with bipolar, really severe bipolar disorder, because the medicine was just making me go bananas, and ended up getting locked up. So I wrote about that, my experiences in a mental ward. It was kind of a sane person, but I was just nuts at the time. So there's that in there too.
How old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was in my late 20s. I'd say probably 25, 26 or something like that.
Okay, and then you kind of bounced around.
When I got out of the hospital, even just the very first time, the doctor said, "Well, we're going to let you out because I had I didn't even have insurance when I first got it, and there was no pre-existing, condition type things back then." So when they got out of the hospital, they just said, "You're sick. You're well enough to get out. There's a county hospital, but you can't work for another 8 weeks to a few more months probably." And I had to work. I had time I even had a family. So I was able to work. I kept losing jobs because I would get sick and be missing work and stuff. And then I couldn't get insurance. And if I didn't tell them about my disease outright, when I couldn't get the insurance, they would fire me, because they knew I had a chronic illness, and they were afraid I was going to be a bad employee. And then I started my marriage fell apart, and then I ended up being homeless for a while, and I was living in really bad neighborhoods. I got to know a lot of criminal people, and because I couldn't work, I just started dealing drugs for a living, and did that for quite a while. But I found, and there's a chapter that's just devoted pretty much to that, to kind of de-glamorize what being a low-level drug dealer is all about. And it's not fun, and it's dangerous, and it's scary, and it's something I'd never do again. I'd rather dig ditches or lay down and die before I do something like that again, I suppose. But and I guess I was just trying to take away, it was all the cool people I met along the way and the experiences I had that most people wouldn't have, and maybe just give some people that are maybe involved with another person on the back. I put a blurb saying that it's useful information for people dealing with Crohn's or another illness, because there's a lot more that goes into it. It can be a chronic illness like this can be just a huge life-changing experience. And my mental illness too destroyed pretty much all my family relationships and friends and things like that, because I was so nuts. People just really couldn't handle me. But it was a temporary thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm fine, and everything. But during that time period, and I don't blame anybody, I was just a scary person, and and that loss really changed my life, and I'm still dealing with it to this day. I always count my blessings. When you get out of the hospital and it's a nice day out, you really realize how appreciate. And the one other thing I learned is there's always someone who's got it worse than you, so you really should count what you got.
Yeah. So true, Daniel. Thank you. Mila Christine Bourdon is retired from the U.S. Air Force, and it was her love of country and family that inspired her book entitled Surviving America's Decline and the Progressive Agenda.
When I heard in 2008 about this idea about transforming the country, and my first thought goes back to what I learned about Russian history. One of my teachers was from the former Soviet Union. She said that one of the problems with Lenin, Karl Marx, and all these people was they talked about changing the country, but they weren't very clear about what they were going to do with it. While the young people went along with it, there was a great deal of angst from older people, and they asked for details. I found that also the same in 2008. Like, what are you talking about transforming the country? But I didn't hear any real details. I did hear about healthcare, something that I really did believe in. But when I hear transforming the country, I think Lenin, and look what they did with the country. People didn't like it, and so they went out murdering people. How many millions died of starvation in their camps? What kind of a person would feel that they had answers for everybody that would come across so radically? And when I consider changes in the country since that time, there have been a lot of radical changes. I've started following news more closely. By 2010, I felt like it wasn't just radical changes. It was also the gradual slide of this country, lowering of standards, that there were changes in America that were taking place that I felt were not good. That I started thinking back over the decades, what had led us to this point? And I thought about Vietnam. A lot of people I knew where I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, had served in Vietnam. Young people were coming over, college students, and telling how they hated Nixon, and turned out they didn't even know where Vietnam was in the map. Everybody was just joining this. It was like a big club, jumping on the bandwagon to complain about Nixon, to complain about the war.
So you were frustrated by the people who were raising their voices during the Vietnam War, and they didn't even know where it was on the map.
Exactly.
And you feel like the same thing is kind of happening now.
Yes. Remember the Wall Street occupiers a few years ago?
Yes.
There were some people out there smashing storefronts, just having a reason to riot. Oh, and also after the election in 2016, some of the people rioting against conservatism turned out they didn't even vote. That there is this tendency, I think Glenn Beck one time called them useful idiots. Stalinists used them to bring the country down. I think the same thing is happening. The youth are typically unaware of a lot. And I think there's this whole movement right now to bring the country down for God knows what reason. What are they going to replace it with? Well, we're hearing now socialism.
All right, Mila, thank you. Finally, Robert Ozapinski had a dream, and now he has what he calls a killer chiller thriller entitled The Altar Boy that he says will make The Godfather look like Cinderella.
The children's homes, St. Jude's, Arnold Palmer, Winnie Palmer, the Shriners, the disabled veterans, the commercials on television, and one family goes without eating, the food kitchens around the country. I prayed to God that he would help fund these, and I had this in a dream on January 15th, 5 hours. It was in my head. I got up the next morning and wrote it, 9 chapters, 7 hours, and 5-star killer thriller to help. That's what this book was written for, to help fund these charities predominantly. He is a perfect young altar boy that's always doing good, and something happens in his mind, and he turns to serial killer, basically, and no one believes it because he's such a good a boy. Nobody could believe a frail young man who's honest in the neighborhood loves him, and everybody convinced the police and the whole everyone it's impossible, and they got no leads. He's that good.
And you're doing a little Italian accent there, a little mobster accent there.
Yes, the people are Italian immigrants, his parents are.
And what sends him over the edge?
Sometimes the brain has a dysfunction. Just for whatever reason, he decides that he wants to kill. People kill. They get a fiend for it.
How many people does he kill?
He takes out of 5, I believe.
And how does he kill them? Is there anything significant about the way he goes about it?
Older people and young children. He's too weak to take out somebody strong, so he does this, and he's a fool. Everybody, people like scary stuff. So I want to give it to them, stuff that they never read before.
All right, Robert. Well, thanks for that. And that's a wrap for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Thank you for being with us. Thanks to all of our authors. If you missed anything, download the podcast at 710WOR.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. See you next time.